And we're live. Hello, everyone. For those of you who were waiting, thank you very much for joining me again. This is, I believe, my fifth YouTube live, and today we're going to be talking about the thirds. Now, the portion of row day 5 of Texas All-State Etude at the end, and that is measures 64 and 65, has quite a few thirds in them, actually, and also some sixths. So I do get a lot of questions about that, about the best ways to tune those thirds up and best ways to practice the double stops. So therefore, I would like to talk about that. And of course, while I'm talking, feel free to post your questions. That's what I'm here. That's why I'm doing it live, so that I can answer as many questions as possible. But before we go on, I want to give a big shout out to Crafty Gamer 27, also Maria Ochoa and Joshua Garza. Thank you guys. You've been joining me. Crafty Gamer is always there, and thank you. I hope you're here again, and I hope my lives are helping you. And the same with Maria Ochoa. She's a wonderful student of mine, and thank you for joining me. And thanks to Joshua Garza for joining us last week. So let's dive in. There are three things that are very important when you're trying to clean up your thirds, or any double stops to that matter. But today we're talking about the thirds. And number one, each third takes two voices to play. So instead of usually tuning just one finger, you have to tune two fingers to make sure that each third is really as in tune as possible. Number two, you have to connect it to the next third. So now you have two pairs of fingers that not only each third has to be in tune, but then amongst themselves, the first and the next third have to be in tune. And then finally, because now you're using pairs of fingers instead of just one finger at a time, you only have now two pairs, right? Therefore, the amount of shifts increases tremendously. And that is the third thing that we're going to talk about, how to also work on your shifts, because you have way more shifts in your thirds. So number one, this is my favorite way to tune each third by itself, to make sure that each third is tuned and the voices I'm playing are in tune with each other and on its own. It's usually called the broken double stop, or the broken third technique in this case. So for example, in measure 64, you have, right? Starts like that. So instead of jumping in and just trying to tune all of those thirds all at once, what I'm going to do, if I play this for the first time, I'm going to take the first third, which is D and F sharp. I will put both the fingers in left hand together at once on the fingerboard, but I won't play them at once with my bow. I will separate each voice, make sure that the D is in tune, fix whatever needs to be fixed, and then on the way up, I will play them together. And I'll do the same with the next third. Remember, the key is you do have to drop your fingers at the same time on the fingerboard. Otherwise, it kind of defeats the purpose of exercise. And again, drop. Pardon me, it's my alarm for some reason going on. And so forth. So number one, so this is how you tune each third on its own. The reason you want to break the voices apart to tune, because that way you can hear exactly which voice is out of tune, because you could have one voice perfectly in tune and the other one is out of tune, and it's very hard to tell which voice is out of tune. So that's the first step. Make sure and tune with use those broken thirds technique so that you know that each one of those thirds is in tune. Now, the next step is, how do I make sure that in relationship to each other, all of those thirds are in tune? And this is one of my favorite ways to tune the thirds amongst themselves. So one of my teachers, she taught me to do this. So let's take the first two thirds we have to deal with. It's D, F sharp, and then C sharp, E. So instead of changing both fingers at once, what I'm going to do, I'm going to lift the fourth up, but not the second. So this way I'm left with C sharp, F sharp, which is a fourth. And so once I tune the new voice of the C sharp to the old one, then I can lift that one and tune my other voice of the new third. Does it make sense? So let's try it again. So here is 2, 4, and 2 of the first third. So it's D, F sharp. Now, I'm going to change only the bottom voice right now and leave the F sharp hanging there. So now I get C sharp, F sharp, which is a fourth. This way, before I play both new voices, I can make sure that one of the new voices for sure is tuned to the old one. Once I know that this C sharp is in tune, I'm going to lift the 2. You see, and this way, now I know that these 2 thirds not only are in tune, or not only each one of those thirds is in tune, but also amongst themselves, they're supposed to be in tune and fit within that one scale that I'm trying to fit it in. Does it make sense? So basically, I'm using the perfect fourths to tune my thirds between each other. And the reason I'm doing that is because perfect fourth, the reason it's called perfect, because it's what we call a perfect consonance. If you don't know what the consonance is, it's an opposite dissonance. We all know that dissonance is something that sounds very unpleasant to our ear. And dissonant intervals are intervals such as second or seventh. You know, they sound very, very unpleasant and very harsh. Dissonance is an opposite of that, but not every pleasantly sounding interval is actually a perfect consonance. A perfect consonance is a perfect fourth, perfect fifth, and an octave. Those are the intervals that actually coincide so well and harmonize so well with each other that you can tune them literally perfectly, and you can get to the point where you can tell, yes, these 2 notes are perfectly harmonized, they're perfectly in tune. And those intervals are fifth, perfect fourth, and octave. That's why fifth and fourths are called perfect. However, the thirds and the sixth, even though they are consonants, but they're not perfect consonances. And that's why it's a little harder to hear whether they're really in tune or not. And that's why if you ever sung in the choir, for example, your choir director will always tell you to fudge the third. The top voice of the third should always be a little bit lower, because the third is not a perfect consonant, so you can have a little leeway. When it comes to fourths, you have to make it perfectly in tune if you want it to sound consonant. And that's why fourths are such a good help in tuning double stops. So next, we do have a lot of shifts, right? So how do we deal with shifts? Well, the best way to do it is the very basic shift technique, which is anytime when you have to shift into a new position and change fingers, you go into a new position with your old finger, and then you drop or lift and change fingers to the new fingers. So in this case, we have that shift. So we need to get into the second position. How do we do it? We shift with the old fingers. And then we drop the new fingers. Then the same. You got it? So one more time. I'm going to play it a little bit slower. So instead of jumping to the second position, I'm going to actually first go to the second position with the fingers that are already on the string. So 3 and 1. Then I'll drop drop my new fingers. Do the same trick. The same trick. So as you can see, all of the time, every time I shifted, the two old fingers that were on the string that I used to shift were always 1 and 3. So how about just making up an exercise of shifts that you have to go through in that passage with just those two fingers? So you could basically do this. And my teachers always taught me to go backwards whenever I practice shifts. So as you can see, if you 1 and 3 really know what they're doing, then the 2 and 4 will be very easy. The job of 2 and 4th fingers to find that third will be very easy. That won't be hard. It won't be hard for them to find the new note. So let's see what happens when you go up an octave. The same. Right? So the good news is that it's basically almost the same pattern, a little bit even easier because it's much lower. It starts in the first position and goes up to only the third one. And again, you can use the same exact principle of shifting with the old fingers. Yeah, and that's it. Once you got to the third position, basically all you have to do is to drop your pinky right next to your third finger, and then 1/3. Right? And then for the chords, if we're going to talk about the chords, chords are basically, if you've tuned your double stops up to this point, it's very easy to tune your chords because you just treat them as two pairs of double stops that you can string together, that you have to string together. In this case, we only have three note triple stop chords. So in this case, you have a 5th and a 6th. And then all you have to do is make your fingers switch and then go down to the second position. And again, you have a 3rd and a 6th, right? And that's it. So these double stops are not so bad. But I have to warn you, don't leave it if you're planning to actually compete in all state, or if this is a part of your all region, cut these double stops and the chords, this particular passage. Please don't leave it till the last moment. You really need to start practicing your double stops right now. One of the ways to practice is to find a scale in thirds. That will be the most useful for you for this particular row day, and just start practicing every day, just like you practice any other scales. Most of the books that have 3-octave scales probably offer you some passages of thirds, and it will look something like this. You don't even have to go past the third position. So if you play, and again, you're going to practice, you're going to use the same techniques as I mentioned before. If you've never played thirds, I would suggest first you start with the broken thirds. Practice that. Then you tune each third to each other by taking your fingers, changing your fingers one at a time. And so forth. So this way you can really, really tune your thirds. However, you have to be very careful because double stops are quite strenuous exercise, and so if you're comfortable practicing your scales for hours on end, don't expect to be as comfortable when you practice your double stops, because it's really, really demanding on your left hand muscles. So one of the rules that I have for my own practicing, and what I always recommend to my students, is to make sure that you're already warmed up when you practice your double stops, but not tired yet. So maybe 15-minute warm up, you feel really, really good. Your fingers, your muscles are soft, you're relaxed, and you are not tired yet. So once you get to that point, I would say practice about no more than 10-15 minutes. And if in that could be also too much for you, you just have to really watch out for your fingers, for your hand, for your arm, because there's a lot of a lot more twisting, especially when you play thirds. And so you have to watch it. If you feel completely comfortable, then I would say after 10 or 15 minutes, still take a break. But if before even getting to that, you start feeling uncomfortable, all it takes is just put your violin down and make sure, walk around, just completely drop your arms. Don't do something else. Just really let your blood circulation to restore to normal. Carl Flesch wrote this book. Apart from his scale book, he wrote this book of basic studies. And in that book, of course, that was very long time ago. That was like the very beginning of 1900s, I think. And in that book, he says that it takes only, I don't know, 30 seconds. It's like ridiculously small amount of time, or maybe to get your blood circulation to normal, as long as you drop your arms. Well, I like to be on the safe side. Take a break for 5 minutes, and then you'll see that you're going to feel much better. But go right back. So if you're feeling okay, you practiced your double stops for 10 minutes, you took a 5-minute break. If you feel good after that, and doesn't feel too strenuous, go back and repeat after that little break. You'll be amazed at how much better you will feel. It's just, I don't know what it is. I think when you take a break, something happens in your brain. It kind of, my daughter calls it marinates in your brain, but it really is. It's amazing. When you take a short break and then come back, you can do things so much better. Now, the hardest part about tuning the double stops is that sometimes you have to make a choice, because they are not, as I said, thirds are not a perfect consonants. So you could actually fidget with them, and it's expected for you to kind of, instead of just going to your tuner and finding the perfect F sharp and perfect D, if you just play them together, most likely they'll be out of tune. So again, the rule of thumb here usually is for the major third, major third is the bigger one, make it a little smaller, and for the minor third, make it a little bit bigger. Now, however, with your fingers, it's the opposite, right? Because the major third actually feels smaller. For example, D and F sharp, that's a major third, and fingers are closer to each other than C sharp and E, which are a minor third, so they're farther apart. So actually, when you're playing the third, so you should be aware of that. So when you're playing this one, you have to make sure that your F sharp is not too sharp, because if it is, it doesn't sound very good. See? That's much better, right? With this one, you don't want your C sharp to be too sharp, because it gets it almost sound like a major second. So I pulled it down, it sounds much more in tune. And of course, there are those tartini tones that, I don't know if you've heard about them, but it's, if you play two notes perfectly in tune, you actually will hear a third note that will be usually an octave, at least an octave below. and it's generated by your instrument just because of all of the frequencies. If they're aligned together really well, you get that really awesome third tone that drops down an octave. That's actually, sometimes it's lower than what your violin can play. For example, if you really tune this F sharp and D, if you really tune it at home, you will start, if you feel that it's really in tune, listen carefully, you will start hearing, at first it sounds like a buzz, but it's actually a third tone. It's a musical tone. And what it will be a D, but it will be a whole octave below the D that you're playing with your fourth finger. So this is amazing because your violin will actually be playing a note that's not even in its range. And this is the key to making your violin sound brighter, to getting a better sound out of your instrument. Actually, I remember that when I started practicing back when I was a conservatory, I started practicing my double stops. No one ever told me about that. I did not know. I kind of heard that whenever I played my double stops in tune, there was that third note on lower, an octave lower, that would I could hear. And so at first I was just really curious what it was. And then I started hearing what pitches they were. And then after that, I was hooked because that's the only way I could practice. I would just really practice. Whenever I practiced my double stops or chords, I wanted to make sure that I played in tune enough where I could really, really hear that third note on the bottom. Now, of course, the audience is not going to hear that actual note, but what they will hear, they will tell you that things like, what I've heard since then, since I started practicing, people would tell me, what is that violin you play? It's so resonant. Or I would get compliments on the fact that I have a really powerful sound and I don't seem to be working that hard. Or that sometimes people ask, were you mic'd? Literally, like I would play with the orchestra and I would get questions like, I can't believe you're playing this old Italian violin. They're usually not that powerful. So I credit that to the fact that I always, anytime I practice my double stops, I always try to get those extra notes, those tartini tones, as audible as I can. And I believe that teaches my violin to vibrate even better, because that's what happens. Your instrument starts vibrating in sync because that's how it's made. You know, the bottom and the top, they're tuned to different notes. And so the more in tune you play, the more your violin is going to resonate. And so I believe that really, that's why I love double stops and I play them a lot. Well, if you guys, do you have any questions? I would like to, this is, before we go on, I want to let you know, I'm leaving for Italy at the end of next week. And you know, now YouTube has this requirement where you can't really do lives unless you're doing it from your laptop or your desktop. And I'm not taking my laptop to Italy, but I'm going to do a live, definitely, but I will use Instagram. So we're gonna put my Instagram name in this in the comments after we're done with the live. So if you have any questions, if you want to see again that live that I'll be doing from Italy on Instagram, you're welcome to follow me, and then this way you will know. I'll post an announcement there when I'm going to conduct it, and hopefully Wi-Fi will work and internet will be good and reliable. But I would love to do that from Italy. So any other questions? Let's see. If we don't have any questions, I would like to talk about, since we're talking about double stops, let's go over the chords, right? So in measure 37, we start those fun little right? So again, here, the strategy in the left hand is very important, not just on finding each chord, but how do you connect those chords with each other? And you don't always have to go from the bottom finger to the top. Sometimes it actually works better for your intonation if you build the chord from the top, even though in your bow arm, obviously you are going to go from the bottom. So that goes for this chord at the end of measure 38. Going to the next chord, I would much rather nail my F natural first than put the B on top of it. This way I know for sure that I'm going to nail it. And then the same when I'm in measure 40. Going from this, which is what? 3, 4, 5, fifth position, down, I don't think I could find that B, weird B that I have to play with the second finger in half position. But it's much easier for me to find that F. So I'm always thinking of finding F first, then B. So those are some of the times when it really pays to build the chord maybe from the top in your left hand. Now, next, this is another kind of double stops that's kind of hidden. You know, it's tricky because Rode doesn't really give you double stops openly here, but technically you're playing octaves, right? So, for example, here, measure 37. You realize these are octaves, right? And so the best way to practice, remember how I told you to practice to clean up your double stops, you break them? Well, here he technically gives you broken octaves. So to clean those up, you do the opposite. You play them together. So let's see. So it'll be. So if you can do all of those. If you can play all of those ascending passages like that with real octaves, and if you can get it perfectly in tune, then that means you, in your left hand, you're doing the right things and you're definitely going to sound in tune. Now, one thing that will teach you is that you have to have both fingers on the strings and you have to move your arm rather than trying to nail each finger. I see some students trying to play it like this. You see, that is not going to work because at some moment you're going to have no fingers on the fingerboard and you basically have to jump out of the blue and find this new position. So what I recommend that if maybe practicing them as octaves might be a little bit strenuous at first, you can do this. Then play them together after you played each one. Then make sure and shift with your first finger into the new position. You don't have to, by the way, you don't have to be pressing all the way to the fingerboard. You can slide on the very top surface of your string. Can you see that? So basically, let me show you what happens. Then I'm gonna, you see how I'm releasing first and then gliding up into the third position. Then I'm gonna press. This way, my hand is not going to be so tired. And also my shifts will be much smoother. Because when you squeeze really hard and try to move, you get this slingshot effect. Because at some point, your hand realizes that it's squeezing too hard. And if it's releasing while you're still moving, guess what happens? Yeah, it's like a slingshot that you just, tighten, really, really tight, and then let go. So to counteract that and make sure that that doesn't happen, it's like a little insurance policy. We're going to release first. However, you have to make sure that you're still touching you can't just let go and let the string. Obviously, if I let go completely, then you can hear that open string. No one wants it. That's why you basically release, but still cover the string with your fingers, kind of like on a harmonic. And you can do that backwards. So this would be the most, I would say, the safest way to practice these octaves without straining your hand. And once you feel confident enough, then you can just play actual octaves and see how well you can cover those. Another way I like to check if my double stop is in the right place is harmonics. So some notes, on the fingerboard, they coincide with natural harmonics. For example, we all know this. We all know that this note in this part of the fingerboard, any string we press, will give us a harmonic, right? But there are many other parts of the string that will do the same. For example, or, right? Or, so those are called natural harmonics. Natural harmonics need only one finger, and they basically happen naturally because you can find certain parts of your string where you only lightly cover the string with your finger instead of pressing all the way to the fingerboard, and that cuts the string only some of the overtones in half or whatnot. Something happens physically that not all overtones are covered, and therefore you hear that weird note that is much higher, a couple of octaves higher, sometimes 1 octave higher, and it could be a different pitch. So oh, hi Gabriella, I'm so glad you tuned in. So Gabriela Rubio is asking, hi, Dr. Sides. I was wondering if you could go over G melodic minor scale. Ooh, that's a great question. And that is because of the Fiorillo, right? Great. I will definitely do that. So G melodic minor scale, number one, if you guys are wondering how key signatures in minor scales work, so this is the easy way that I do it. So if you're playing a G minor scale, you think, can you count a step and a half up from G? There'll be G to A is a full step, A to B flat is a half step. That means B flat major will have the key signature that will apply to natural G minor. Does that make sense? So G minor, basically natural G minor starts with a B flat major key signature. The problem with that key signature, if you play a minor like that, it's very boring. So this is what it sounds like. There's nothing that happens at the end of the scale. There's no half step at the end of the scale, right? Like in the major scale. That's what we love about the scale, right? That last half step that just makes us want to finish it, right? Back to the first note we started at. So that's the biggest problem, I think, with minor scale, that if you play just a natural minor scale, you don't have that wonderful half step at the end of the scale. And I believe that's my theory, that this is why we have more than one kind of minor. So we have a natural minor that I just played for you. We also have a harmonic minor and a melodic minor. And the reason that we have both of those minors, because those are the ones that are changed a little bit so that we do have that nice half step at the very end of the scale. So let's go straight to the melodic minor scale. The melodic minor scale, what we have, we are going to use a B flat major key signature, which is two flats, right? B flat and E flat. But to get us to have that wonderful half step from F sharp to G, obviously we're going to change our F to an F sharp. We also will change E flat to an E natural. And so this is what we get on the way up. E flat, E natural, F sharp. Okay, so that's a lot. So basically you can think it's almost like playing G major, but with a B flat, right? Because that's the only thing that's different from G major right now is I play the B flat. After that, I had an E natural and an F sharp, right? Now, the hard part about the melodic minor, it sounds wonderful on the way up, but on the way down, it's a completely different scale. Basically, once you play your scale all the way up, on the way down, you have to forget all of those things that you changed and go back to G minor natural key signature, which will be, remember, it's a 2 flat key signature. So on the way back, it'll sound like this. Got it? So if you have your instrument, let's try it together. Yeah? So, or you can virtually play your instrument and think about that. So here's an open G, then A natural, that's a whole step, then B flat, half a step, then whole step again, D, whole step to E natural, whole step to F sharp, and half step to G. Now on the way back, we're going to move those fingers back, and we're just going to roll down B flat major scale, only starting it on the G. So it'll be G, whole step down F, whole step down E flat, then D, B flat. So what it does for composers is, and why did they have to go so many times? Why didn't they just stop at harmonic minor? Well, harmonic minor is a little bit simpler because in the harmonic minor, you just change that seventh note. You bring it up. Instead of F naturally, you play F sharp. Everything else stays the same. So you get this scale. Which is, you can hear how interesting that scale is, but it's also has that very specific sound that has that augmented second from E flat to F sharp, and that is what makes it sometimes unusable. Sometimes it's just too, genie in a bottle, very Arabic sound that is just sometimes just doesn't flow, and it sticks out like a sore thumb. So I think that's why they went ahead and went changing even the E flat to E natural to avoid that augmented second and to get yourself a nice scale. So if you play any Bach, any Baroque music, you'll hear that most of the time they use the G minor melodic scale. And so let's see, how did Fiorillo use that G minor scale? So here's my favorite part of Fiorillo. It's measures 26. Yeah, I messed up the bowlings, but so let's go here. When we're gonna go right here. You see how he gives you G, F natural, E flat, D. That's a snippet of a melodic minor moving down. Obviously, there are a lot of chromaticisms and he changes it around. But by giving that last little snippet on going down, he kind of gives us an idea that, yes, we're in G minor and we're moving down. So very good question. Yes, I think this is about it. I really enjoyed having these lives, and I hope that you guys enjoyed them. I know that today is still 4th of July weekend, and a lot of people are traveling. A lot of our people are still celebrating, but I wanted to go ahead and have this anyway because you know that the show must go on, and no matter what holidays you have to practice, and the sooner you start practicing, the better it is. So this was really great. If you guys had your answers to your questions, then I'm very happy. And I hope that you will join. I will do the live on Instagram sometime next week. I'm not sure, so I hope you join me. And again, we'll put some information about the Texas All-State Boot Camp in the description, so you guys can let me know if you're interested. Let me know in comments, and I'll try to help you to join, but it should be pretty easy because the link is pretty self-explanatory. Okay, have a wonderful rest of the weekend. Thank you, Gabriela, for joining. You have any questions? If not, then I hope you have a great time practicing. Bye.